pleasant morning to you. Thank you for staying with the Flow of Godson State, Flow 94.9. Welcome to the pinnacle of all discussion platform. And then, the most recent development in terms of the government of the day, their decisions to rejig things, especially in terms of the civil service, was yesterday, and just looking at the information following the inauguration of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry on the recovery of properties and funds belonging to Abia State government. The Governor, His Excellency Dr. Alex OTTI'S, has directed the immediate suspension of the head of service and all permanent secretaries in the state civil service. That very information continues to say, consequently, the governor has approved the appointment of Lady Joy Maduka, Director of Ministry of Education, as acting head of service. And then he says that all other permanent secretaries, except that of the clerk of the house, including the Solicitor General, by that very notice, directed to hand over to the most senior director in their respective ministries, departments, and agencies. And some persons are raising eyebrows in terms of this very one. And we want to find out, look at this one, test the waters and the veracity of this very decision. So it will be the fulcrum of our discussion on the platform this morning. It will be double. The first half I will have with me Sir Chimdi Oluoha. He's a retired Permanent Secretary. Good morning to you, sir. He joins us virtually.
Thank you, Wisdom. Good morning.
Thank you for obliging to be part of the program this morning. Let's start this way. Let's look at the powers of the governor in terms of appointing head of service, and how rigid is that very power? Does he have such power to suspend and to appoint and all of that? And what kind of process does he go through before such can materialize?
Well, thank you, Wisdom. What is happening in the civil service of Abia recently is unprecedented, if you ask me. In recent history of Abia State civil service or public service. I think the last time we heard of this kind of suspension was when former Governor Elechi in Ebonyi, retired virtually all permanent secretaries he inherited from his predecessor. That was Governor Elechi. Governor, the last governor, the immediate past governor of Ebonyi. That was the last time we had such a move. Well, talking about the appointment of the head of service, it's the prerogative of the governor to appoint head of service, and usually appointed from the body of permanent secretaries. It is purely it's a constitutional rule. It is his duty to do that. Well, to that extent, yes, and he also appoints permanent secretaries on the directive or on the recommendation of the head of service, based on merit, primarily. And then, of course, you follow some conventions. Of course, the civil service is hierarchical. And from the appointments of the permanent secretary is usually from the body of directors, considering merit and then seniority. So that's the situation, yes.
Apart from what you've mentioned, looking at merit and seniority, trying to confront the issue head on, do you think he looked at all of these things in making this very decision, having alluded to the fact that these very decisions of his are his prerogative? He has the power to appoint a head of service, and that, of course, the permanent secretaries. But do you think that these options were exhausted en route to making this very decision? And like you called it, unprecedented. Do you think it has anything to do with the change of government from the People's Democratic Party to that of the Labour Party, and all of that?
Well, the issue is that any watcher of developments in Abia would really be surprised that the upper or the higher civil service is being removed this way, because the permanent secretary is the chief accounting officer over the ministries they supervise, and they are really the ones who hold on when the political appointees, namely commissioners, would have gone as a result of the change of government. And so when you now come and remove those who are supposed to be the medium that will help make the transition successful, it's worrisome. It's indeed worrisome. Now the question would be, what could have led to this? Against the background I have painted, what could have led to this? That's the question everybody should be asking.
I mean, some persons would argue that the government is trying to read the system of maybe those who they feel are not capable enough to work in tandem with their policy to bring about a true dividend of democracy in terms of that very aspect. And some would feel that, the people there worked with the past administration. Do you think that these may have heralded or informed the decision of the governor to go this very way?
Well, maybe, but that would be, wouldn't that be too early to judge how effective the permanent secretaries, the 7 permanent secretaries are? Wouldn't you think that's too early? But be that as it may, the fact is that there seems to be a lack of trust. That's my thinking in this regard. If you consider that permanent secretaries are civil servants who are normally neutral, non-partisan, and that is why they are seen as those who stay and ensure that the new government will come in and help them stabilize, let them know the procedures, let them know the rules, let them know how things are done in the civil service. Because the service, as a matter of fact, is the engine house of government. If the service does well, invariably the government will perform well. So it is disturbing, indeed disturbing, that this class of civil servants, high-level civil servants as permanent secretaries, who should be the ones to help the new government stabilize, are now being removed. My thinking, it's arguable though, my thinking is that there's a lack of trust.
Now let's look at
the new government appears not to have confidence in the civil service, particularly the higher civil service. Otherwise, I do not see why this should be happening so early.
Before we look at other issues surrounding the imbroglio of having to suspend some key stakeholders in terms of the civil service now, are you envisioning that the resultant effect could just be leaving the head of service and whatsoever it is set to bring to the table in the next 4 years all over the place? Because obviously they are handing over to the immediate junior of theirs in that very hierarchy, and if the transition is not smooth, there could likely be loopholes or lacuna here and there. Does it affect the process in the end?
Well, if of course the statement issued said suspension, that they were suspended. Well, it means that maybe there's an offense, or that they're investigating, and then they need these people to step aside to investigate and arrive at something. So I leave it open that somehow they will come back. Those found guilty, the disciplinary process will continue in line with the rules. I want to emphasize, let the rules be followed to remove people at this time. These are career officers, and they have the number of years they're expected to stay before they retire. Removing them abruptly
if you don't mind,
it will obviously have some ripple effects in the system. We have seen it before, and I don't think the civil service has recovered from the one that was done earlier. So doing another one now, we have to be very careful so that we don't cause more problems for the civil service. I therefore think that extra caution should be taken at this time. If it is the reform that is going on, it has to be a lot more. We have to be careful to make sure that we do the reforms very well. To give a director the acting head of service, where you still have 2 permanent secretaries left, for me. I don't know how to explain it, except to say that there is lack of confidence. Otherwise, if you have 2 permanent secretaries, one of them should have been the acting head of service, isn't it? But given a director, acting head of service, when you have 2 permanent secretaries standing, there's something wrong somewhere. Something is really, really wrong. That's what we need to find out.
So you are thinking that the governor has little or no trust for the permanent secretaries that he has elected to go for a director based on the rank and file of the civil service. I want us to look at some other things now. There's been these cases of extension of service, basically those who by their time and the number of years they are meant to serve in the civil service, they have attained the age of retirement and should throw in the towel and allow the system to reabsorb other people who could likely grow through the ranks, and even allow those who are already in the system to equally take that very upward trajectory move. Now, is there anything like extension of service, and at what point or condition can it be invoked?
Well, extension of service in the public service, of course, is at the discretion of the governor, and it's usually based on need, where you don't have any other person who can do that job. But when you have people who are competent enough to do it, extension of service may not be necessary. Rather, it will help to demotivate. It will help to demotivate career officers when they are there, capable of doing the job, and you give extension to somebody who has retired. It's not decent. It's not appropriate.
Okay, let's look at another issue. There is this case of appointees of the governor seemingly trying to meddle with the affairs of the civil service. One is being reported a certain appointee of the governor is directing a top civil servant in the health ministry to hand over to the immediate junior in that very office, still owing to the entire reform and decisions we are seeing in the aftermath of the emergence of the governor, Dr. Alex Otti, in recent memory. What is the guiding principle, or what measures should be taken before such could happen?
Again, it calls for caution, consultation. Ask those. We have people who are knowledgeable in civil service matters. We have retired heads of service. We have retired permanent secretaries. We have people that could be consulted to get things right, depending on what the situation is. I don't have details of the point you're making, but I once again will appeal that the governor exercises caution and consult widely before and during the reform he intends to carry out. Because reforming the civil service should be painstaking, should be thorough, and should be based on need. Before you remove any civil servant, there is a process which involves the permanent secretary, involves a staff committee, involves the Civil Service Commission, depending on the level of officer. But higher officers like this, directors, you don't just remove them anyhow. There's a process.
Okay.
You don't carry out disciplinary measures just like that. There's a process. Issue query. Answer is given. Depending on what the situation is, you can set up a committee to look into that. And then if it is not serious, it can be disposed at that level, at the ministry's level. But if it is serious, and depending on the level of the officer concerned, it goes to the Civil Service Commission, who is the agency that recruits and disciplines. So you cannot just carry out disciplinary measure without involving the Civil Service Commission. Depending on the level of officer, the senior officers, it must bring in the Civil Service Commission, following the guidelines. The rules are there, written, black and white, and it's there for anybody to see. So we must be cautious. I still call for caution. Let's be cautious in handling the civil service. It is not just an ordinary organ. It is a very serious, complex, but necessary organ for the running of government effectively. I repeat, the civil service is the engine house of government, and it must be handled with caution.
So, Chimdi, in the wake of all this back and forth involving the reforms and a couple of decisions made by the incumbent governor, perhaps to set the ball rolling and trying to ensure that things are done, the civil service is one area a lot of persons have pointed at in recent memory over one thing or the other. But what is the place of the Civil Service Commission? What are their job, and who is capable as per qualification to man such a body, especially in this kind of situation?
Well, generally speaking, it's the governor that appoints members of the Civil Service Commission, and they are usually experienced people in public service matters. It's one area you don't need overwhelming political influence. But the appointments must be based on merit, those who are qualified, who have experience, the knowledge about the civil service. You can add some politicians if the governor decides, but those politicians must be those who are used to civil service and its operations, its rules, its nuances. Because if you miss it there, you have missed it. If you miss it at the recruitment level, you have missed it. If you miss it at the disciplinary level, you have also missed it. So you must recruit right and ensure discipline along the way to ensure that the civil service, which is a disciplined service, hierarchical, neutral, and loyal to the political executive, is maintained. That culture has to be maintained, and it starts from recruitment. So the governor, in his wisdom, has the right to appoint those who occupy the Civil Service Commission. But he must also, because of his own level of experience, he can also consult. The head of service is there. There are other consultation levels he can embark on to get the right people to occupy those positions. You have former heads of service. You have retired permanent secretaries. You have people who have headed government agencies who understand the civil service. Put them there, and they'll give you the best.
Well, if you're just tuning in, it's been the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions this morning. We are looking at the civil service reform with a lot of decisions made, a lot of persons experiencing suspension as Yesterday, we heard of that very information coming from the stables of the governor over the suspension of the head of service, including permanent secretaries, all but 2. And in the get-go, I mentioned that I've been speaking with Sir Chimdi Oluoha, a retired permanent secretary here in the state. Before I let you go, I want to ask a very key question. More often than not, there tend to be a swipe at the civil servants over their capacity and contributions in the state and overall. And what is the essence of training and retraining in attainment of objectives, especially in the aspect of civil servants now? And what's the obligation of the government to carry out such a task?
Yeah, thank you, Wisdom, for raising this. Hello, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, fine. Thank you for raising this. Training and retraining are key in the civil service because you cannot give what you don't have. There are ways of doing government business, new ways of doing government business coming up every day. And if you are not undergoing training, you won't be able to be abreast with these developments. So in this reform we're talking about now, let training and retraining be part of it. Let the funding of training be made a priority, providing money for training, establishing a viable training apparatus for the civil service. In the past, some time ago, there was this attempt made to set up a civil service academy here in Abia State. But over the years, nobody talked about it. I recall that we went somewhere along the expressway between Tower and the mega filling station. A site was cleared, and we went there to lay a foundation for this civil service academy. And all of a sudden, the thing fizzled out. So there has to be a viable training structure to regularly train the civil servants. It could be done within. You mustn't be going out. But it's also necessary to go out, because when you go out for training, you get to know what is happening in other environments. And of course, it motivates greater action among the civil servants. So training is key. I thank you for bringing it up. It's key. We must include training in this reform. The reform must be deliberate, must be systematic, and must be result-oriented. Let it not be targeted at some people. Let it be holistic, and let it be results-oriented. And that result we're talking about is getting a viable, functional, and result-driven civil service that is devoid of undue political interference, that is devoid of allowing civil servants to get into partisan politics, because that may be one of the problems we're having now. Allowing civil servants or encouraging them, directly or indirectly, to belong to political parties. And once you do that, the loyalty of those people who engage in partisan politics is doubtful. So training is key.
Let me sincerely appreciate you, Sir Chimdi Oluoha, retired permanent secretary, for bearing your mind on this very issue with us this morning, even at a short notice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Wisdom.
Your wealth of wisdom was palpable.
Thank you.
All right, so this is the first half of the platform. We will go on a very short break. When we return, we would turn the microphone to another astute person this morning to hear his own side of these recent happenings in the state, especially in the rank of the civil service. Stay with us.